Hello everyone and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 3.50. It also happens to be our 100th video inside of the Bitwig Studio and Music Production series. And so I thought now would be a very good time to take a pretty big time out and to take a huge step back and not only recap and review what we've talked about in these past 100 videos, but to also maybe take a little bit of a look ahead as to where we're going. But most importantly of all, get back to the real basics and ask some of the really important questions when it comes to making your own music and also why you're doing that. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. But for starters, I wanted to just quickly review the best way on how to access all of these videos in the easiest way possible. So if you're inside of YouTube and you're new to this whole series, the best place to go is search for my name, Brian Bowman. I'll also put a link to the playlist in the description. Go to my page here, go to playlists, and then right here you have Bitwig Studio and Music Production. And as you can tell, we have 99 videos totaling approximately 28 hours. And my recommendation would be to watch one or two of these videos in order every day, or every day you have 30 minutes or so to give up to watching a video. And at that point, just kind of sit, reflect on the video, and then hopefully you're at least somewhat familiar with some kind of music making application, or maybe you have a synthesizer, or you have something that you can muck about with for another 15 or 30 minutes or so. That way, by the time we actually get into Bitwig Studio, if you've done that, and if you've just experimented for even sometimes just 10 minutes a day inside of your software of choice, you can really become an expert that way, and in which case you won't really need that much from me other than just kind of getting a review, and you'll be probably saying, oh my God, this guy's a total idiot. He has no idea what he's doing. Because truth is, I know I've made a number of mistakes along the way, but that's a part of it. That's part of learning. And hopefully you guys have been able to learn from a lot of my mistakes. And my guess is you've probably figured out some ways to do things a little bit more efficiently, or at least ways that suit you better. So let's jump back into the Word document. My goal of this isn't to just read this word for word, but I also know that if I go off script, sometimes I go way off script, and it's difficult for me to come back on to the major and main focal points here. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we're going to try to ask some of those bigger questions. And now if you've gone through the first 100 videos, I think you're going to be a little bit better equipped to try to answer some of these questions. But at the beginning, especially if you were brand new to this whole topic of making music, you might have a better sense now and some experience to draw upon. So the main goal of this video series, and I've kind of changed this from the first video up until now, but the major goal, the main point, it's very simple. It's a very lofty goal, but what I'm trying to do is to help people express themselves through the medium of sound. And for a lot of us, that's a big change up, even if we are producers or sound designers before coming into this video series. The reason I say that is if you are a music producer right now, you work in a studio context and you're producing for clients, or if you're a recording engineer and you actually are live tracking things in, or you're a sound designer and you work in like the film industry, for example, a lot of times you have very specific tasks. So for example, let's say I'm a sound designer and I'm working on the big, I don't know, whatever the next Hollywood blockbuster is. Okay, I'm going to come in, and a lot of times the director is going to give me a cue sheet, and it's going to say, okay, I need you to get this, this, and this sound done by X time. And so you have a deadline, you know what you need to do, and so you get to work on it. And you finish, and then the director or whoever is going to listen to it and say, okay, these work, these don't work, here's why. And you go back and you start working and going in that direction. Same thing if you are working at a recording studio or you have your own studio and you're live tracking in a particular band. You know what your job is. You know there's a deadline. There's a set amount of time that these people have booked out the studio for, and you need to work as efficiently as possible to help them capture their musical or artistic vision or the sound that they're going for. And that's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, you really have a direction. You don't have to do so much of that creative work from scratch. The truth is, I think that recording engineers, mixing engineers, mastering engineers, I find them, a lot of them, to be phenomenal artists and really creative people. Um, but a lot of times they're not working from scratch. They already have a sound in mind. They know what direction they need to go in. And that's even true for some of the really big pop music producers. They sit down with the artist, they sit down with the label, they sit down with all of these people, and they kind of come to a group consensus of what they're going for. And that leads me to my very first point, and it's one of the reasons why making music from scratch, which is what I think this video series is all about, can be so difficult. Really, since the Industrial Revolution, and I'm just going to say in the mechanized world in the 21st century we live in, how often do we really create something from start to finish? And I've kind of prefaced that by saying oftentimes we are just cogs in the wheel. For most of us, if you don't actually make music from scratch for a living, if you're not like an artist in that way, you end up just being a cog in a much larger wheel system. And there's a number of people I know who work for businesses where they probably honestly couldn't tell me what the business actually does. They're just these huge multinational businesses, and they just have offices and spaces all over the world. And these people sit in an office and they do something day in and day out, but at the same time, they're not actually creating something. They're just a pawn in the bigger chessboard of life. And unfortunately, that is just kind of the way things are today. For better or worse, I don't really know. But unfortunately, we very rarely are able to take pride in our own creations. And even think about the pop music industry for a second and think about how, like I just mentioned, it's basically track by committee. You might have 15, 20, 30, up to 100 or 200 people who have an investment in this. That's the way the music business is today. And so they are all trying to throw in their 2 cents. And if we even look at the credits for like the most recent Katy Perry song, there's probably 30 or 40 names we'd have to go through, and all of them have worked on the track in one way or another. There's nothing wrong with that, but even then, even in pop music and even in so much of the music we hear today, usually the artist isn't actually the one doing everything from start to finish. And so even then, it's very difficult to take pride in that, to really take pride in saying, I was with this from the beginning all the way to the end. And of course, at some stage in these videos, we'll talk about mixing, we'll talk about mastering, and why there really are benefits of maybe having other people do that. But I can tell you from personal experience, I don't get the same sort of feeling with any kind of project unless I've done it all the way through. And I really like doing it that way, because then I feel like, look, this is what I've done. It's all me. This is all my work. This is all my blood, sweat, and tears. And even though I know someone with more experience, someone with a better ear for mixing and mastering could do a better job, I honestly don't care, because I like it being all mine. It sounds very selfish, but I think for a lot of us as people who are very artistic and creatively driven, you don't want somebody else touching that project. You want to be the one who's responsible for all of it. So with that in mind, let's transition to a couple of other topics here. And I want to talk about just the current state of things. Not necessarily the current state as in today, but just how we evolved and how we've gotten to this point where a lot of you are interested enough to be researching videos, which is wonderful, and going out and doing your own experiments and making your own compositions. So, of course, it all begins with the popularity and the easy access to technology, the whole technology boom. That's really what's been responsible for so many people, I'd say, putting down the paintbrushes, myself included, and turning to the computer and turning to the digital audio workstation. Nowadays, technology is so easy, it's so fast, it's so efficient and reliable that to make art, it's actually cheaper to have, a MacBook Pro and some kind of digital audio workstation than it is to be, working with oil on canvas. Let's be 100% honest, it's incredibly expensive to do that. And with that, there's come this new means and speed of communication. Obviously, we all know what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the internet and the way in which There's really been another big boom in the speed of the internet and the fact that now everybody basically can run high-speed internet. Everybody can stream decent quality audio from the internet, or they can download audio. Maybe it will take a little bit longer, but we can quickly share our songs, and there's places to do that like SoundCloud and a number of other services. If you've been checking the news recently, you know that SoundCloud is kind of adhering to the whip in a lot of ways, but perhaps they didn't really have a choice there. The big thing here in terms of music is the popularity of EDM, the festival culture, and of course the glorified DJ producer hero that we all see. EDM has really gotten popular, and I honestly don't even know how to define EDM. But all I know is that for a lot of people and for a lot of fans, people think of EDM and instantly think of the big festivals, Ultra. I can't even think of some other ones, Electric Daisy or something like that. And there's Tomorrowland, etc., etc., etc. That's kind of the image most people have of EDM. And of course, then they look on stage and you have these producers who are like almost demigods, just basically up there pressing buttons, which, you know, I enjoy watching people press buttons, but it is kind of crazy just how much fame and how much money and wealth these people have really brought in, when, to be 100% frank and honest, it's really not that difficult to produce the kind of music that they produce. Just my opinion. But more people want to make music. They have the ability to do so. And they've seen this EDM world. They've seen all of that stuff. They've seen the glitz, the glamour, the supposed fame and wealth and notoriety that these people have received. And they think, well, I'd love to make music too. I'd love to be in that position. And I think it would be really awesome if I could do that. Now, that all is going to come back to supply and demand, right? I mean, those people who are in power, those people who are super popular, who are at the top, they've obviously established and have proven that they're very marketable. And so what's the reason of some of these big labels taking risks on you? The truth is there's absolutely no reason for them to do it. And that's why the same few 15, 20 DJ producers have stayed at the top for so long. If they can keep making and selling and the label's happy with what they're doing, they're not going to be replacing those people. So I always kind of find it funny when you read online or you talk to people and they're like, I want to be the next, I don't know, Tiesto, or I want to be the next David Guetta. I don't know if people actually say that. Maybe they do. But you always have to remember that those people, they're bigger than just the music they make. And oftentimes they're probably not even making the music. They themselves are a brand. They themselves are a logo. And what they're selling isn't their music. They're selling their name. They're selling that image. You know, I remember recently there was this Budweiser commercial with Zed on it. And the funniest thing is they show a shot of his laptop, and I guess it's supposedly some DJ software, but it just says Zed across the middle of it. And it was this brilliant idea of branding and marketing, as if to say, this guy is so big, he has his own software that he uses to DJ, and, you know, they just made it look really cool and fancy. And in the future, and, you know, not only were they selling Budweiser, but they were selling Zed, the brand. And obviously he uses Tractor. So, just to kind of try to put all of that into perspective for you. So the biggest question, the most important question that you always need to ask and keep asking yourself, and oftentimes it's the hardest question when things aren't going really well, is why are you actually making the music to begin with? And I'd really hope that you guys kind of pause the video and just think about that for a minute, because I know for me, there are many times when I kind of consider not doing this at all because I couldn't come up with a good reason for why I was doing it. If you're doing it for fame or you're doing it for wealth, that's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think the approach you want to take is very different from the approach that I'm trying to show you in these videos. And to be 100% honest, if that is your goal for making music, you really probably shouldn't be watching this series, because I'm not really going to be able to help you that much. So going back to the current state of things, another bullet I have here is education. And this isn't just music education. This is the state of all higher education, specifically here in the United States. That's all I can speak for because this is where I'm from, and this is what I've seen. And it's become readily apparent to me that that education bubble is going to burst sooner or later. It's really encouraged to us from the age of 10, 8 or 9, even younger, that the big goal is to always go to college. You need to go to college. That's what they stress to you from the very beginning. And you wonder, why are they stressing that to me? Because if everybody goes to college, how can everybody come out of college and get a job in like the working sector and be able to support yourself on your own, to actually have your own property or have your own house and live a comfortable life? Honestly, you can't. And that's the one thing nobody likes to say, but obviously the education sector is all in on it. The high schools look better if all of their students graduate and go to college. The colleges want that money. The colleges want that prestige. And I'm sure many of you know people, like I know people, who have gone to college and really have been promised a lot of things from their school and have gotten out. And now that they're no longer paying into that scheme, the college is nowhere to be seen. They're not helping you out anymore. And you're pretty much just left on your own, and you're in a position like you were when you got out of high school. College is great. I think that higher education is super important. But at the same time, I really hate the way that schooling is going, the direction of it here in the States, because it is incredibly exploitative. And a lot of people get into trouble because they have to take out loans and then they go into crazy debt, and there isn't a job for them wherever they live or in their sector or whatever their workforce is. And so they can't find something, so they struggle to pay back the loans. It's all a really horrible scheme. And that's the part that the government and the colleges don't tell you about. But I think, in 5 or 10 years, that education bubble is really going to burst. And there was a time when there was a big growth in people going for higher education. And so tons and tons of schools popped up all over the country. And now, they're actually struggling to get people enrolling. So they keep trying to push that message of you need to go to college, because breaking down that infrastructure is very difficult to do when so much money has been invested into a lot of these institutions. And now when it comes back to music, a lot of schools are attempting to follow this trend, and also the trend of online education, which again, what is their message? What are they trying to sell to you? They're trying to sell to you that if you get this degree, you are going to be more successful. And that is not what education is supposed to be about. And that is the exact antithesis, of what this entire video series is about. The focus here is on the education. It's not on the end goal. Because if you go to an institution that says, look, we're going to promise you a job and we're going to promise you this degree, how hard are you actually working for that degree? And how much do you really care about the education? Because going to learn something, you should be very passionate about it, and you should really be wanting to learn that new subject to just better yourself as a person, not just to try to better yourself, as really, again, a cog in the wheel, to be 100% frank and honest. And in the music world, it's gotten really crazy and out of control. And so companies inside of the music education sector, inside of the sample sector and the preset sector, etc., is gotten out of control. And at a certain time, there was a pretty big supply for this, for people needing samples or wanting preset packs, etc. But you have to put into the context of supply and demand. When you have so much of it, which there is so much of it, the demand is actually going to start to go down. We've seen that it's started to go down. And yet at the same time, there are more and more of these companies attempting to spring up, and they're trying to make a quick dollar. Unfortunately, now that's all kind of blowing up in their face, and it's not really starting to work, and they're not starting to be profitable. And also, I think that those people, if they actually ask the question, do you really care about the music these people are making with your samples? They'd say no. The goal is to make a quick dollar, to make profit on it. And there's a huge amount of oversaturation, and there is no quality control. And honestly, unless you really, really need samples, or you really feel like you need the presets, don't invest in those things, because you probably have more than enough and plenty of options already built into whatever software you have. Plus, there's a wealth of free samples available online, that to pay into these is a little bit silly, because you also are trying to kind of take an easy way out. And these companies have also preyed on that, because we do live in an age today where it's all about instant gratification. So the question I pose is, what tools are being taught from any sort of institution or from, people doing videos about music, and from what angle are they approaching the subject. So I've seen a lot of videos out there that exist that are really what I would say sparkle videos. They try to teach you a cool little flash in the pan technique and say, look how cool this is, you should use it. But at the same time, they're not really putting that into a broader and a bigger context. They're not actually asking, well, why are you making that music to begin with? And so for me, those videos might be really cool, and I enjoy watching them to try to pick up some new tips and tricks. But at the same time, how often do I actually go in and use some of those things? Most of the time, I never would even consider using them in most situations. And it comes down to being an individual versus being an easy mark. Don't be that person, or try your best not to be the person who buys in constantly to all of the magazines saying, here's the ultimate guide to this or the ultimate guide to that. You're really that easy mark that they're trying so hard to prey on. And they don't care if you're going to be successful. They honestly don't want you to be successful at what you're doing, because they want you to keep buying more and more and more and more. That way they're able to stay in business and they're able to make more money. So the one thing I've tried to stress throughout this whole video series thus far is the importance of you being an individual creator and being an artist. I try not to show the very stereotypical uses of some of the effects and the stereotypical ways you're going to use the tools or the options you have, because I want you to be an individual. I want you to look at these tools and maybe use them in a completely new way that nobody else has thought of, because at this point, there are so many videos out there teaching the exact same techniques that there is no room for individualism, it seems like, anymore. It's like they're saying this is the only way you can use it. This is the way that everybody uses it today. And the truth is, you can be an individual. You can kind of break that trend. And that's where really, really interesting art comes out of. So that's what I'm talking about here with static techniques and application. There's an overabundance. It all becomes very mechanized. It becomes very contrived. It becomes very repetitive. And then suddenly we're back to where we really started with the first point I made, talking about the mechanized world that we're living in and just being cogs in the wheel. So when you're making art and you're making music, especially if you're not a producer, by trade, if you're really more of an artist and a creator, do your best to break out of being the cog in the wheel and just try to do some stuff 100% on your own. Maybe we can go through these things a little bit quicker. I know that I've already talked quite a bit, but I just wrote here that popular EDM is pretty much dead now, or it's in the state of dying, and most of that has to do with that oversaturation, what I've been saying. And I'm not referring to deadmau5 coming out and making a proclamation, EDM is dead. He's only saying that because he's trying to sell his new album, and he's claiming that it's not EDM, despite the fact that no one can pigeonhole or define the EDM. I'm referring to it more as the culture and sort of the big business that has kind of swirled up around it. It's definitely going to start declining because people saw the potential for profit and they just milk the cow to death. If you could have just seen, the speed from when deadmau5's Faxing Berlin came out, which I guess was really a track that kind of pushed all of the EDM culture forward. And then, of course, he has his mouse head and then ghosts and stuff, et cetera, et cetera. He's profited millions. He's made millions of dollars out of trying to push this idea of EDM culture and EDM musicians. And now he's trying to say, I'm the trendsetter, and I'm saying it's dead. It really frustrates me quite a bit because, again, he's in it for the profit. He's making a new album and he's claiming it's not EDM, but if it's electronic in any way, I feel like I could argue that it would be. And I just asked the question of how do you choose to farm the land? And in this case, I'm referencing this EDM landscape. So what big business has done, as you'd expect, they immediately came in and they pretty much just worked the land until the soil was no longer fertile and never will be again. And then when it's actually your own land, when it's your own music, how are you going to choose to take care of it? And I just want you to think about that, how it applies to your own music, and to take a lot of confidence and respect in what you're doing specifically, and not so much worrying about the overall climate in the scene at the moment. Because, for example, let's say like you're really into trap music right now, which is totally cool. I encourage you to produce it and to experiment with it. But if you think you're going to get famous, or you think you're going to push any boundaries by making trap, you're not, because it's already been done. You're already now reacting and just trying to copy off of something else. You're trying to jump in, and it's a little bit too late at this point. You need to be, if you want to be a creative artist pushing things forward, starting to just do your own thing and not really being bound by those rules from the start. And oftentimes with sample packs, with preset packs, they wait for that new style. That new style comes out and they quickly oversaturate the market by offering tons of samples and tons of presets that fit that particular genre. And it's one of the reasons why we see the speed of genres and subgenres and subgenres inside of EDM moving so ridiculously fast. Art, obviously, in the 21st century moves at a really rapid pace, but I think even within EDM, it's absolutely insane the speed at which things kind of come and go. So I'll leave it at that. Let's transition into making music, and we'll get a little bit more positive here, maybe not have quite as much a cynical tone. But in my opinion, anyone and everyone can make interesting music. I'm not saying profitable music, but interesting music. If, number one, you have the ability to hear, you can make really interesting music without being able to hear, but you're not really going to be able to listen to it, and that really stinks, unfortunately, for the people who no longer have that ability to hear. They are working on devices that can attempt to convert the frequencies or the air pressure variations to electrical impulses, which could then go to your brain and trigger some kind of sympathetic response. But I think that technology is probably still a number of years out. Here are the other factors. I think number two, you need to take your time. You need to practice. You need to learn how to listen critically. You need to work hard on not giving up. My number 2 and 3 here seem so very, very simple, but these are the things that take a lifetime to fight with and to keep on trying your best to battle through. Because number 3, you are patient and you are as open as you possibly can be. Work hard to appreciate sounds and songs beyond your aesthetic preferences. Actually look for things that you dislike and try to understand them. And by the time you understand that music, you're probably going to start to like it. For some reason, I've never been a huge drum and bass fan. I've just never really liked it at all. I never really got it until I finally was sitting there and just listening to a couple of tracks just on repeat again and again. And eventually I started to get into the groove and I started to go, yeah, you know what? This is really, really cool. And for a lot of people, I think trying to enjoy pop music today, top 40, is very difficult, but you really need to work hard to try to understand that, because when you can understand the artistry and the difficulty that goes into making some of these songs in the top 40, I think you're going to realize that there's so much you can learn from it. And many people are just so blockheaded and so tunnel vision, thinking that their style of music is the only thing that's important, that they forget that where you're going to really learn new things and what's going to push you be outside of your comfort zone is to seek out those things that you right now maybe don't like quite so much. Developing as an artist is a gradual and a very long, hard process. I think we all know that, and it's one of the reasons why we see so many, younger kids and just younger people jumping onto the EDM bandwagon into trying to make music, and then they give up after 6 months because it was too hard. Those people are not really artists. They're just looking to try to jump in on this, what they believe is a gold mine, when really it's already all dried up anyway, as we've already mentioned. And of course, experimenting. The more you experiment, the less stale and boring the process becomes. Doesn't mean you're going to necessarily make better music, but at least it keeps things interesting. It keeps things crazy. I do agree with Cage in some ways, and I do think that leaving some things up to chance is really a great way to breathe some life into your music. And of course, having fun. People will say that all the time on a bunch of different websites and other places you go. It's true, but you have to remember that you're not always going to have fun, and people who say stop when you're not having fun clearly don't know how the brain and how the mind works in any sort of artistic creative endeavor. I really love playing tennis a lot, and I've been a tennis player for a very long time. And if I stopped playing tennis the first time I wasn't having fun, I would have stopped playing tennis after the second ball I ever hit. Okay, I think it's very similar inside of the music production, music creation world as well. The first like 30 or 40 tracks you make, you're going to really hate, and you're going to be like, man, did I make that? That really, really sucks. That sounds nothing like what I was going for. And if you give up at that point, you're never going to break past that wall, and breaking through that wall into actually making the sounds you have in your head takes a lot of time, and that means that it's not going to be fun all the time. And I know for me personally, the more open I am to new sounds and experimenting in my work, the more fun I have with it. I can't say that's going to be true for everyone, because sometimes experiments put you down in a totally different direction from where you thought you were going. But just remember, that's not always a bad thing. But I will say, if you always do the same thing, if you always follow the same formula, the work might be profitable. You might be able to sell, which if that's what you're focused on, by all means do it. But I think the less fulfilling the work is going to be. And recently, I think the Cataracts broke up, and one of the guys left that production stable. And honestly, I always liked the work that those guys did. And I honestly believe that the one guy left just because the work was starting to get really stale, because they realized they had to keep following the same formula. And although it was getting them hit after hit after hit, it just starts getting really boring. And when it starts to get boring, that's when you probably should start to question again, why are you making this music in the first place? And what exactly is it that you're going for? It may not always be fun, but hopefully it's never to the point where it's becoming really boring and stale. So what's our process been in all of these videos? This video is a prime example. It's been a very slow, painful, and at times a probably very boring process for a lot of you. A lot of what we've covered has been review, it's been very simple, or it's been very technical. And I know that that's not always the most fun thing to watch, but honestly, I think that the order we've covered things in has been the most logical. It's been the way to build that foundation. And just like a pyramid, unless somehow, aliens helped in building it and they started it from the top down, every sort of building site needs a foundation. And when you look at that foundation, it's usually an eyesore. It's usually very bland and boring and just sitting there. But at the end, after you've built on top and built on top, you start to see how that building is going to take shape. And really, before it's even done, you have a pretty clear vision of what it's going to be. And hopefully at that point, you can really start to be happy and proud that you went through and did all that foundation work to begin with. Sprinkles, those are great. Those little tools and tricks and awesome techniques that people will put up online, they're awesome to see. But those are things that you shouldn't be too worried about adding right now. You probably want to go back and add those at the end. And although Bitwig has some really unique and cool features to it, I see no reason to jump straight to the sprinkles when you can make really interesting music with oh so much less. And I think that I hope that I've shown you guys that you can do that. 5 samples and just a couple of little parameters, and we came up with something pretty crazy. So I assume people have already made videos on some of the more unique aspects about the software, and if that's what you really are trying to get, that's what you really need to know right now, search out those videos, because I obviously haven't made them yet. This series isn't about sparkle or promising an ultimate guide to anything. If you want those, there are several publications and companies that will promise that, but typically those do come at a price, and they very rarely will offer you any kind of refund. If after reading their article you're no longer the ultimate master on compression, well, are they going to give you your money back for that? No, I don't think they're going to do that. This series isn't about generating views or subscribers. This series isn't a gimmick or a get-rich-quick scheme, and this series isn't showing you a really neat trick without context. Our goal is to learn and to understand new concepts and try to learn together so we can feel more comfortable and confident making whatever kind of music or sounds we want to make. So the bigger question is probably then, why are we using Bitwig Studio and not something else? And honestly, I don't have a great answer for you, and I'm trying to make it so that most of the videos are not software dependent. Obviously, to some degree they are, but hopefully the bigger philosophies and things we're discussing are not. Why am I supporting Bitwig specifically? Mainly because it's a new company, it's a very small business, it's an easy to navigate software. It's a great teaching tool. They follow the keep it simple, stupid philosophy, which I absolutely love. So it's easier for us to make choices quickly and to get into making music. I love Ableton Live. I know Ableton Live inside and out. But when I open up Ableton Live and see just how much they've added since even like Live 6 or 7, it's like, holy Jesus. If you didn't know what you were doing, you would just be looking at a rack full of effects and instruments and all this stuff. And now Max for Live is in the fray. It's a great program, but I think it's very overwhelming for a lot of people who don't have a lot of experience. And so when you don't have a lot of experience, you don't want those many choices. Plus, for Bitwig, there's plenty of time for them to grow and to evolve, and we're starting out with it from the very beginning. And again, it's all about laying those foundations. So unfortunately, I can't go back and make a video series on Ableton Live 1 and then move on to Live 2, Live 3, etc. We're starting with Bitwig 1, and then as it continues to evolve and grow, we can do all those things together, which I think is really cool. And this is the first software where anyone's been able to do that, really. Especially in this kind of a format. So if you're looking for something with all the wrinkles ironed out, you're really going to have to look elsewhere, because the truth is I've run into so many bugs and so many glitches, more than I can count. I think more than most people are going to run into, because I'm trying to push the software in different ways than what most people are probably using it for. So why are we not using another software? Absolutely no reason. Use whatever you want to use. I don't care if you like Logic, if you like Reason, if you like Pro Tools, if you like whatever. Use what you want to use. We did a video comparing different DAWs, and honestly, I'm not trying to say good or bad things about any of them. Just use what you're most comfortable with. But of course, we're walking through a lot of these demos inside of Bitwig Studio. No digital audio workstation or software is inherently better or worse. Oftentimes, you just have to take slightly different approaches and different steps to trying to accomplish something. And so for me, I find the side-by-side comparisons to be really pretty futile, because it doesn't matter. If you, any kind of really good artist can make interesting and compelling art with whatever's in front of them. You know, I think I said on another video, if for some reason my laptop had crashed and I had nothing except for a student's computer that only had GarageBand on it, guaranteed we could do something really crazy and creative using just the built-in stuff that comes with GarageBand. I feel really confident about that, and it's something that I take a lot of pride in, and I hope that as we go through these videos, it's something you guys feel you'd be able to do as well, and you can take pride in that too. So here's some miscellaneous questions. They've either been asked to me specifically, or they've popped up in the comments section on some of the videos. And here's a question I just wrote myself because I think it's a very valid question. Why are there so many technical, mundane videos covering things anyone could do and understand on their own? For example, we went through and talked about the chorus effect and the flanging effect and the tool effect. And I mean, really, does it take somebody to actually open that up inside of a little lab session project and go through the parameters? It probably doesn't, but for me, there's a really good reason why we do it. And it's mainly because what I'm showing you is so technical and so mundane, and it's something that you could very easily do, but for the most part, I never see anybody do it. The first time I see people open up a project like in Bitwig Studio or in Reason or something or Ableton Live is they immediately go to grabbing the most complex presets that are inside of the program and being like, look at how cool this is. But at the same time, they have absolutely no idea what they're doing or what they're turning. That can be a lot of fun, but then when you actually sit down to try to make something specific, you have no idea where to start and where to go. And I think it's really important to understand how every single parameter will impact your sounds, especially when things start to get more and more complex. So that's the reason, that's why I encourage even the most experienced producer to watch those videos, is just because you get a really good sense of how even the smallest of change, how that is going to impact the timbre of your sounds. The next question, why haven't you showed us any practical techniques thus far? And I'd answer that by saying it depends on how you define practical. There are a plethora of videos and articles showing specific techniques that I actually believe will take away from the creative act. Taking these effects and experimenting with them on your own may result in totally new and individual ways of using these devices. There are a lot of articles that will say, don't use this effect to do this, or don't use the effect to do that, or here's the way you want to go about doing this. Go about setting up anything however you want to set it up. The fact that you can drag and drop things and put them in whatever order you want is what makes these programs so freaking amazing. There are no rules, and you should never feel like you're bound to any rules inside of a software unless it's coded to not let you do something. And the people at Bitwig seem pretty committed to letting you do anything, even if it ends up failing and all blowing up in your face. I mean, we learn so much more from our failures than we do from our successes. But in this very instant gratification world we live in, we just want that result right away, and we don't really care about going through the failures if we don't have to. But I'm still a firm believer that failing is actually what's going to probably help your art the most in the long run. So another question I get quite frequently, when will we get to synthesis and the built-in instrument devices? And we're going to be getting to those very soon. I can't give you an exact date. I honestly couldn't even tell you what today is. So we will be getting to those pretty soon, so just stick with it. Is there a timetable or a schedule for your videos? I do have a rough outline in terms of what I want to cover and when, but with an actual schedule or timetable, I don't. All I know is that if there is content to be covered, I will keep doing these videos until I really physically or financially can't do them anymore. So let's just go through our final thoughts and just give a quick little wrap up here. I'll probably read this paragraph straight through. Why all the videos? Why am I doing this to begin with? And the truth is, some of it is definitely partly selfish. Doing these videos has given me renewed vigor to create and experiment and to give myself some of those limitations that otherwise I wouldn't, because I do feel pretty confident inside of this digital audio workstation. And with most software that I end up getting my hands on, I feel like I know how to push it and to really make things super crazy and super complicated. But oftentimes that results in some really bad work and work that I just end up deleting because there's no place for it. It's when you really strip things back, when you go down to the basics, that I think you can be most proud of some of the things that you're doing. And so definitely some of these videos have given me some tinges of selfish satisfaction for sure. I also believe that this sort of content and education should not be packaged and sold. It should be available to anyone who wants to learn. You can tell I'm a little bit cynical at the way the education system is working right now. So for me, I just feel like, I want to do my best to try to give you guys some information, and I hope it's helpful to at least a couple of people. Also, sometimes I think just watching someone else work in a software can make you feel more comfortable and willing to open it up yourself. I can speak from personal experience that oftentimes the hardest part of the day is just opening the software. It just takes a long time to get your mind into that zone, to be willing to open it up and then to start working on something. I don't know why. Maybe I'm crazy and I'm the only person who's like that, but sometimes I found that just going on and watching one or two tutorials is enough to make me say, okay, I can open it up, I can get working, this guy can do it, I can do it too. So I hope that maybe for some of you, you've had those experiences, and I kind of equate it to attempting to apply the first bit of paint to the canvas, right? That's oftentimes the hardest part of the entire process. So on to a slightly different point. The one thing that cannot be taught, the one thing I can't teach you, which I wish I could, I wish I understood it, is inspiration. And so for me, in those frustrating times, that used to be when I would go and watch a few tutorial videos or read a few articles online because I wanted to try to stay on topic, but I just wasn't. Nothing was happening. Nothing was going. I needed to wait for like those moments of inspiration. And sometimes it's the weirdest things in those tutorial videos or in that article that gets me going, that gets me experimenting and running some weird tests. And then I'm suddenly like, you know what, I can use this in my own composition in this way here. And then boom, I'm off to the races. So I hope that my videos provide a good sort of logical and easy structure to follow. So hopefully, if you're working really strong for a week and you don't need to go and watch any videos, that's great. But then when you do get stuck, to maybe just jump in and watch one or two, and then boom, you've got a new idea, and that can push you off and get you creating. Let's see, what else do I have to say here? Also, I want you guys to remember that you can seek inspiration from any and all sources, whether that's your environment, if you live in a city, if you live out in the country, if you're in the woods, if you're in the mountains, whatever. Always look to your immediate environment and your surroundings for inspiration. Other music, obviously, literature, art, film, photography, just doing the laundry, opening up the fridge, whatever it is, always be looking for that inspiration because you never know when it's going to hit. And sometimes, honestly, if I'm really stuck, if I'm really struggling, this is going to sound weird, but I'll just turn everything off. I'll just close my eyes and just listen to the ambience of the room. And then, I hear maybe the air conditioner kick on, or I hear some sound from outside that I can't really fully locate. And again, sometimes it's those really weird moments that get you inspired and get you to keep working. So let's just wrap this up. And here's the paragraph I wrote to try to sum up everything. So here we go. If just one person has found any of my videos helpful, and by helpful, I mean it's gotten you to try and create some new sounds of your own, then I am totally happy and content with what I'm doing. The main objective of these videos is to encourage you to get creating or to get producing. I don't care if you use samples or presets or whatever, just so long as you are expressing yourself. I can't promise that you'll be a famous or successful artist, but if that's the goal, you need to question why you've turned to sound and music in the first place. If you want to be famous, focus on your image and hire someone to do your music. Passion is passion, persistence is persistence, neither of which can be taught. Techniques are just techniques. Understanding any technique won't make you a better artist. It's all about how you use them. When you get stuck, often making things simpler is the way to go. With the digital audio workstation, we have so many choices, and it's one of the reasons why making music can be such a challenge. Take everything with a grain of salt, including everything that I've said so far in this series and in this video, and question everything, including all the things that I've said. Please feel free to share any music you've made in the comments section, because I'd absolutely love to hear it. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video. And again, the only reason I made a video like this is maybe it's partly selfish. Maybe it gives me just a springboard to rant and rave about my random philosophies about music and about art. But also, I think now that we've done 100 videos and hopefully you've experimented and made some songs of your own, you feel like you can start to ask some of those bigger questions, like, why are you making that music? What are you getting out of it? And for me, the act of creating something, something musical is so very, very powerful. And it really can help you get through tough times in your life or a tough situation you're in. And it goes beyond just trying to make a quick dollar. It's really sad the way that I see so many people, why they get into this in the first place, and then they have a totally distorted sense of how it all goes, and they get wrapped up in thinking, okay, for me to be a better artist, I need to buy this. Okay, then once you buy that, there's another person pulling you and saying, well, you need to have the right sort of monitoring environment. Oh, but to have the right monitoring environment, you need to really start worrying about room acoustics. But why even worry about room acoustics unless you have a really good audio interface? Well, if I have an audio interface and that's so good, I need enough effects to actually be able to hear what I'm doing and do crazy and unique things. And you can see how quickly you can get pulled down this rabbit hole. And all these companies keep saying, you need this, you need this, you need this before you're able to make good music. And so you never even try to make music in the first place. My philosophy to this is totally different. Try to just make music from the start. And if you really run into a roadblock, if you really get stuck, that's the time to maybe start looking for something and ways to improve. But until then, just keep making music, because that's what's going to get you better. That's what's going to make you happiest. That's what's going to help you to become a stronger and more expressive person. And that's what this is about. This is about improving ourselves as individuals and as people. It's about the relationships you make in the process of making music. For me, that's what this is all about. And I hope that videos 1 to 100 have helped you in some small way. And we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep trying. And again, it's all about the music we make. I'd love to hear anything that you guys come up with. I'm always really excited to listen to new music. And really, I can usually find something that I really like in every single piece of music I listen to, because I've recently started to take the approach of, if I'm going to start listening to something, I listen to it all the way through, no matter what. It's such a shame when you're in the car with somebody and they're flipping through like 40 songs on their iPod before they agree on one. It's absolutely craziness. And I think we need to go back to remembering a time when we didn't have the skip button so close to us, and where we had to kind of listen to the songs and had to actively listen, especially if it was something we weren't really liking. If you don't have a choice to change it, you need to understand how that song is working and eventually understand how you can get something out of it. So that's going to do it for this lesson. Thank you so much for watching. I wish everyone the best, and you'll hear from me again in the next one. Take care.